Continuing from the last video, we had the tax data that we got from the IRS, which, as we discussed, has the different fields that are all coded out, and there was the Word document that breaks out what these fields are. But to remind everyone, if you didn't watch the first video, this is the number of taxes filed per zip code. This is the state, and these are the qualifications of if they're 0 to 25,000, 25 to 50. 50, 75, 75 to 100, 100 to 200, 200 plus thousand on their tax return. And this is the amount of money total in thousands of dollars. And what we're going to do is basically go over three of the main formulas that anyone would be using in Excel, which would be a sumifs, a countifs, and an index match. Now, whenever you start typing formulas, if you look at it, there's a sumif and a sumifs. And if we look at the breakout there, it's range, criteria, and sum range. And if we go to sumifs, it's actually the inverse. The criteria and the range are swapped. So one thing that I always recommend everyone do is always start with a sumifs, because you can always add a secondary or a tertiary criteria later. But if you start with a sumif and then later you decide you want to filter by a date range or add a secondary criteria there, you're not going to be able to do that, and you have to rewrite your formula. So with countifs, sumifs, you always want to just leave the S on there so that you don't ever have to go back and rewrite a formula. And the basic syntax for the sumifs is we're going to select our range, and then we're going to pick what do we want to base that off of, and then what's our criteria for that basis. So in this case, if we look at our tax raw data and we get the actual tax returns, you'll see I can just click on the column U. I could also click on specific cells and get U1 through 179,797. But if there's ever more data later, it's not going to pick that up. So a lot of times I like to either click on a table header if I have a table, or click on a column header so that no matter what data is ever in that column, it'll always get the right data for me. And then whenever I have the sumifs, I'm then going to pick what my criteria range is, which is basically if I'm looking for a particular state. In this example, it's going to be where's the list of states that you want me to check. And in this case, we know that column B is our list of states. So we're going to scroll up here. We're going to click on the state. And in this case, we will look at Michigan. So I can inline put the criteria, which is MI for Michigan. And we can see this number. Now, this is in thousands of dollars already, so I'm going to times it by 1,000 just so that I can see the actual number. So for the tax returns that were filed for Michigan for the year 2016, I believe it is, that's the total there. And that's how we do our sumif. If we wanted to count something, the setup is very similar. It would be countifs, and once again, we want to leave that S in there. And then we're going to count how many times Michigan pops up, which would be criteria range. And then we'll go ahead and put a comma and then put the MI. And we'll notice that the totals number that Michigan pops up based off the zip code breakdown is 5,603. And basically what these formulas are doing, if we go to our raw data table, is it's doing exactly kind of what you would think it's doing. It's filtering to a particular item. And then if we filter to Michigan and we control shift down, we're going to see that's 5,603, which is exactly what we got. If we come over to the A02650, which is the actual tax return values, and we add up all these, we can see it's 584 something. And if we look over on our formula sheet, it's 584 something. So we know it matches. One of the other things we can do in either one of these cases is we can add additional criteria. Let's say I wanted to guarantee it was Michigan, but I also wanted it to be in a particular zip code. Let's say 45948. And now it's going to check Michigan for that zip code. And if we type a zip code in wrong, it will return 0 values. So we can see that there, for the countifs, there's only 6, which are the 6 criteria that the IRS uses to categorize the data sets, which were the ones that I talked about earlier. The same thing here, we could add a specific criteria for a zip code, and we will look at our tax brackets. We'll look at column C, and we're going to do 49548. and we're going to see that the total for that zip code would be $555 million is how much taxable income or taxable revenue was generated for the people who did their tax returns in that zip code. Now you'll see in these examples that I broke it out and I put the criteria within this formula, but we could also leave this formula somewhere else. And let's say we put it here, and we're going to have this look at particular cells. So this is going to be our state, which is F2, and our zip code is going to be here in G2. So just so we have labels, state and zip, and then we will go ahead and put total. So if I put some information in here, Arkansas 72086. Once again, we have to be able to type correctly. We'll be able to see that breakout, and then we can always format this and have that with the correct format so we can see. So we'll set that as a currency, and we'll be able to see $208 million. So if we compare this zip code that we used in Michigan versus this one in Arkansas, we can see there's a pretty big difference. If we wanted to change to a different zip code, we can easily type those in. It'll swap to that zip code and do that. The other formula that I find that's always really helpful is an index match. And a lot of people tend to use VLOOKUPs. There are some particular reasons I don't like using a VLOOKUP, because you have to go to the right of data. So if the data you're trying to look up happens to be on the left, you run into a little bit of a lookup issue. So I always recommend people use index match. It's a preference of mine, but the basic context or syntax of that formula is we're going to return something for a particular value. We're going to look this data up. And whenever we do our index, it's what do we want to return? So whenever we look at our data set, we're going to return the state for a particular zip code, and we're going to type in match, and then what are we going to look up? And we'll just put that data right below here, and then where are we going to look for that information? And we can click on columns once again, or you can click on particular ranges. I always go with the column just because it's a little bit cleaner. And then 0. Since we're always 99% of the time when you use an index match, you're looking for an exact match. Whenever we do that, we're always going to put a 0. That 0, as you saw when the little box popped up, just means it's an exact match. So when I type in a zip code, I want it to exactly match whatever I type in. So if I type in 49548, we'll notice that's Michigan. If I type in the zip code I used for Arkansas, 72086, we'll see that that's Arkansas. So for any particular criteria that someone types in here, this will always look up the state and get an exact match on that. If we want to count things, like I mentioned earlier, we can use a countifs. We always want to do that. And then if we're going to add up particular criteria based off of conditions, we can use a sumif. For most of the reporting that I do on a general daily basis, these 3 formulas used in their most basic instance here can do like 99% of the reporting that we would want to do. So once again, the data set I'll link to in the video description, and that'll allow you to download that data set, and you'll have something you can play with to be able to mess with the sumifs, the countifs, and the index matches to be able to practice the different skill sets here. Thank you.